we are officially 1 week away from the worldwide release of The Batman, and with it brings a bunch of new clips from the movie itself. Yesterday, WB decided to post 4 new clips from the movie. Each of them are very different, but they all showcase a different aspect of the film that I'm really excited to see. So without further ado, let's jump right into these and start analyzing and watching them. Now the first clip I'm going to start out with is the Batmobile chase scene when Batman is chasing down Penguin. Now, I've said this a lot in my TikToks and YouTube shorts, but in case you haven't seen them, I love the sound that the Batmobile makes. Something about it is just so satisfying, gets me so hyped for this movie. The Batmobile sounds awesome. It sounds ferocious and powerful, and that's what Batmobile should be. And some fun facts about this scene actually is that in this scene, most of it is all practical effects. All the Batmobile stuff is mainly practical effects, no CGI, no VFX, maybe some touch-ups there. But that whole scene where Batman is flying through the fire, that is 100% practical. Matt Reeves confirmed it. It's amazing to me, and you can definitely tell this movie looks amazing because most of it is practical. I'm not hating on CGI, but sometimes movies go overboard with it, and I'm really glad that in this movie they did practical effects as much as possible. And speaking of ferocious and powerful, Batman is definitely pissed off, and he very much matches his card during this scene. I love that the two go hand in hand with one another, and the Batmobile is sort of a manifestation of Bruce's rage and his aggression inside of him. Now the rest of the clip pretty much just showcases Colin Farrell's Penguin, a character I'm really excited to see. It seems that his character in this movie is to be more of a comic relief character, but it's also his character's origin story. He is not the mob boss character that we know him to be from the comics yet. Now whether he'll be like that in the future movies, that waits to be seen, and most likely we're going to see his progression as these movies and shows go on, because of course there is a Penguin solo movie coming out soon, and I'm sure in that movie we're going to see him become like an arms dealer. He's going to probably take over the Iceberg Lounge like all by himself and see this character become the big bad Batman villain that we know him to be. But that is the end of the first clip. Next on to the Catwoman clip. Now this is definitely the longest of all the clips, and this one showcases Batman and Catwoman, each in their characters alone, but also together. Now the beginning of the clip is pretty much just Selina Kyle breaking into the safe. And once again, Greg Fraser, amazing cinematography, even doing something as so much as showing safe cracking and just showing a bunch of tools. He makes it look so good and so aesthetically pleasing. And here we see Selina Kyle breaking into some sort of safe, doing some actual cat burglaring, and stealing some sort of documents. And this is of course the mayor's house, who, as we know, does in fact die, as it is an active crime scene. And then once she's done all of this work, unbeknownst to her, Batman swings down from his grappling gun behind him, which by the way, that grapple hook effect looks so cool. But then he says to her, "Oh, you're pretty good at that." And I love it. This is just the beginning of this clip, but in the rest of it, we see this sort of snarky, teasy dialogue with one another. It is ripped right out of the comics, and I love it so much. I'm so glad they translated it to live action. But then we get into the fighting, and this fight really is just Selina hitting Bruce, but Bruce deflecting it and dodging it. He's not really launching too many attacks. He's only acting defensively because he doesn't want to hurt Selina Kyle. Bruce has no reason to sort of attack her for any reason. He clearly knows that she's after something important because they're both there for probably the same reason, so he wants to learn this girl's motives. And as we can see, Selina's a pretty talented fighter, throwing up all these kicks and scratches. Bruce is definitely not that he's overexerting himself, but he's not at ease. I also want to point out that everyone on Twitter said that this fight is CGI. Guys, now I love CGI, like I just said before, but clearly it has made a bunch of people just blind to the fact of old movie tactics. First of all, they just sped up the footage, but also too, people can actually do actual fight choreography. As we can see here, it is very much actual fighting, and if you don't believe me, there's behind the scenes footage from this actual scene where we see the characters kicking and hitting each other. It is fully real. Now another thing I love is when Batman has an overly large cape, and I love that the VFX here, which is obviously they're going to CGI the cape because they always do that in every movie, but the cape is flipping around, flapping, it looks too big, but it's sort of like clunky, but also it's using as sort of like an effect where it makes them look all like dark and mysterious. They include it in the film, and it looks so good here in like these 2 shots. And then we see here, Selina's actually a pretty crafty fighter because she jukes him with the eye movement, and Bruce assumes she's an amateur fighter, but then uses it to her advantage and like does this wall kick that's super cool, like attacks his face. But then Batman, being an expert in hand-to-hand combat, is able to catch her and throw her onto the table. Then he disarms her, and I love when he grabs the booklet and just starts walking away, just completely not giving her any attention. It just looks so fun, and it's once again this sort of banter, like teasing kind of effect that we see all the time in the comics. It also kind of reminds me of that one scene from the Justice League animated movie where Batman steals Green Lantern's ring. Is like, what does this do? And just starts walking away, and Green Lantern's like, wait, what the heck? What did you just do? It's the the same kind of a scene. And that is the end of the Catwoman clip. Now on to the Alfred clip. Here we see Alfred confront Bruce Wayne in the Batcave. And this clip is great because it shows all the chemistry between Alfred and Bruce Wayne. Now the main conflict here is that Alfred wants Bruce to step back into the light. Not even back into the light, just into the light, because he's been a recluse for so long. And he's gone along with his Batman side, but at this point right now in the movie, Alfred is fed up. He's like, no, Bruce, you gotta stop this. You cannot lose yourself fully to this Batman persona. And that is, of course, kind of where the Batman ego inspiration comes into play in this movie. And a fun little detail here is that Alfred does appear to have a walking cane, which of course he has many times in the comics. And in this scene, Alfred says to Bruce that he invited some people from Wayne Enterprises to come have breakfast. And Bruce is like, why would you invite them here? Alfred says, because I want you to talk to them, and there's no way you're gonna go there. Bruce, of course, says, oh, I'm too busy for this. I have to be Batman and only be Batman. And this is when Alfred loses it. He tells Bruce, if you keep on doing this, if you keep on only being Batman, you're gonna have nothing left. And Bruce is like, no, this is all I have to do. This is the only thing that's important. And Alfred says, okay, what about the legacy? What about the legacy of your parents? And Bruce counters him saying, no, this, what I'm doing as Batman, is my parents' legacy. This is what I'm doing for them, for their memory. And then Bruce says, if I can't have an effect, then I don't care what happens to me. Showing that this Bruce is not mentally stable, and he's sort of suicidal because he's willing to die for this cause, but not in a heroic way, just in the sense that if I can't do this, then I'm dead. There's no point of me living. And Alfred says, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid you're gonna die. And Bruce, of course, says, the heartbreaking line, Alfred, stop, you're not my father, even though we all know Alfred is definitely Bruce's father. But, of course, Alfred's like, I know. And I love their chemistry. I can't wait for a nice, though, like, fun, emotional scene between them two. But of course, there's a lot of heartbreak and tension between them two because Alfred has raised Bruce and thinks of him as a son and feels responsible for him, but he also wants him to have his freedom and work through his grief in his own way, and also sees that, yes, there is potential for him to be a hero, but he also needs to be Bruce Wayne. So Alfred is always very torn with the Batman and Bruce persona, especially in the early days. And on to the fourth and final clip. Now, this one showcases Bruce Wayne talking to Carmine Falcone at the funeral. And this clip is really cool because it is fully based on Long Halloween comic. And that being the connection between Bruce Wayne, Carmine Falcone, and Thomas Wayne, that being his father. Now, in the comic or the movie, in case you haven't seen one or the other, what happens is that Carmine Falcone is shot one night being a criminal, and he can't go to a hospital because he's a criminal, so he goes to Thomas Wayne's house. And there, Thomas Wayne being the surgeon, heals them all up and fixes them all up good, and Bruce Wayne watches the entire thing. And that's pretty much the exact word for word what Carmine Falcone says in this scene, showing they're fully adapting that part of the backstory in this movie, and I love it. And what's also pretty cool is that during this scene we see a cool back and forth between Bruce and Carmine, because Bruce starts the upper hand saying, oh, I'm surprised you peeked your head out of your hole because, aren't you afraid someone's gonna shoot at you if you're in the public? Because in this movie, Carmine Falcone being the mob boss, he's kind of a recluse. He's in the shadows a little bit, running everything, doesn't make a lot of public appearances because not that safe. But then Falcone responds to this, trying to make sort of connection with Bruce, while also being a little spiteful back. He says, oh, what, are you afraid no one's gonna be able to patch me up because your father's dead? Showing the history between the two of them, but also saying, yeah, your dad's dead. Get wrecked. And I bet you another thing they're gonna try to do in this movie is have Carmine Falcone ask Bruce Wayne to invest in his business. And that being, of course, engage in criminal activities because his father and him have a history, so he wants to, help Bruce out a little bit. And that pretty much is it. I love all of these clips because it shows a different aspect of Bruce Wayne and Batman as a character, as well as showing the chemistry between Bruce and all these different characters like Selina, Alfred, and Carmine Falcone. But I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, I hope you stick around by subscribing or checking me out on my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook now as well too, or anywhere you can find me. I'm Nerdverse anywhere. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.